Part 154. The Perils of Greed. Hakim ibn Hizam was also given large amounts of wealth. As the Prophet gave, he asked for more, and each time he asked for more, the Prophet continued to give. After the third time of asking for more, the Prophet said, "O Hakim, this money is sweet and luscious. Whoever takes it with an open and generous heart will be granted many blessings, but whoever takes it with desire and greed will continue to consume without ever reaching his fill." The Prophet's statement shook Hakim, and he replied,
"O Messenger of Allah, I will never ask anyone for anything again after this."
Hakim lived a long life, and he truly did not ask others again. The people began queuing for money. An uncouth Bedouin went as far as to grab the Prophet's collar and demand,
"Give me some of the wealth of Allah that is at your disposal."
The Prophet smiled and instructed the companions to give him some money. The Prophet continued to hand out the money, not taking a penny for himself, until it completely ran out. Some Bedouins continued to surround the Prophet, crowding him until his shirt was stuck on a thorny bush. The Prophet finally retorted, "Return my garment to me, for by Allah, if I had as many camels as the thorns in the shrubs around us, you would have found me giving the last one to you." Worse yet, a man approached the Prophet and demanded,
"Be just."
The Prophet responded angrily, "Woe to you! And who is more just than me?" The man continued his effrontery.
"This distribution is not for the sake of Allah."
The Prophet responded once more, "Will you not trust me, when the one in the heavens trusts me?" The man stormed away in arrogance, and Umar urged the Prophet to allow him to execute him for his blatant apostasy. The Prophet replied, "Woe to me if the people start to say that I kill my own companions." The Prophet then uttered the famous premonition, "From his ilk will come a group of people who will recite the Quran, but their recitation will not pass their throats, that is, they will not comprehend it, and they will leave Islam just as an arrow leaves its bow." The scholars of Islam point to this event as the birth of the first sect in Islam. The Harijites, Hawarij, are a group of Muslims that appear outwardly pious and increase in acts of worship, but are quick to spill the blood of fellow Muslims and excommunicate people from the religion. This man is considered a proto-Harijite, as the Prophet explained that the Hawarij will spread from his ilk. The Prophet explained that this sect will remain until the Day of Judgment. The Prophet smiled in the face of the uncultured Bedouin, but responded adamantly to the arrogant man who questioned his integrity. A Bedouin may be excused as they are not acquainted with appropriate etiquette, but arrogance is the deadliest of sins. The man effectively proclaimed to be holier than the Prophet, and the Prophet only prevented Umar from taking action due to his concern for the greater good of the community. Allah revealed, "There are some of them who are critical of your distribution of alms. If they are given some of it, they are pleased, but if not, they are enraged. If only they had been content with what Allah and His Messenger had given them and said, 'Allah is sufficient for us. Allah will grant us out of His bounty, and so will His Messenger. To Allah we turn with hope.'" Surah 9, verses 58 to 59. After the spoils of war were distributed and nothing remained, the Hawazin eventually arrived requesting to accept Islam. The Prophet accepted their Islam, but explained that their property had already been distributed. The Prophet nevertheless sympathized with them, as their families had been captured as prisoners of war, so he suggested that they rely on the Muslims' generosity to return them. After the prayer, the Prophet encouraged the Hawazin to ask for their families back and cite the Prophet as an intercessor. The Prophet then stood up and announced, "As for the prisoners with the Banu Abd al-Muttalib, they are all yours." Each tribe leader then followed suit and returned the prisoners of war to their families. The only exception was a handful of recently converted Bedouin tribes. They did not gift the prisoners of war, but instead offered to sell them. The Prophet could not force them otherwise, so he offered to buy them on behalf of the Hawazin and pay from the spoils of war of the next battle. The Battle of Hunain signified the end of paganism in the Arabian Peninsula. With the exception of the fortress of Taif, which would accept Islam shortly, paganism would cease to exist in Arabia. The land of idolatry was cleansed of idol worship, and the prophet turned his attention towards the Roman Empire.